It's been kind of a trying week for everybody, I'm sure. But let's get started. This is a property, I didn't know which one I was doing, Hugo. So this is the one I did for Frida. This we did a couple months back.
Right.
And I'm sure it's beautiful now, right?
It's getting there, yes.
Okay. All right. So let's keep going here. All right. So the first thing we usually do is we look at the outside of the building. The thing that she knew about this, but if I was going to inspect for somebody I didn't know, I want you to check out the neighborhood. This one had a shared driveway, which is horrible. I would never recommend anybody buying something with a shared driveway. If there was a car blocking the driveway, I couldn't have got out or got in. So, but she knew that, and she actually put a new driveway in. The roof, we checked that out. There was a couple little minor things up on the roof, but it was fairly new. And this was a newer roof that I've never seen before. But her roofer says this is pretty common, and it's probably more in commercial properties than in residential. So, and I mostly do residential, so that's probably why I didn't know. So, all right. So you can see here, right here, a couple little damaged spots here, which she said was fixed very easily. So we're checking the roof, we're checking the flashings, we're checking around the plumbing pipes, we're checking around if there's a chimney sticking out. You can see this moss here that you definitely don't want on a roof. So I'm sure she had that cleaned off. You can see here, this fascia, you got peeling paint. If I was going to keep this for a long-term rental, I would probably wrap this in aluminum. And if I was going to flip it, because I believe this was on the back side of the house, I would probably just scrape it and paint it. But if you're going to keep it long-term, I always recommend to try to make it as maintenance-free as possible. If you are trying to do multiple properties, over time, you're not going to remember which ones need paint. So I try to make them maintenance-free as long as my budget will allow it. So this was the garage roof. And you can see right here, there was some damaged shingles, which just because they're damaged doesn't mean you have to change the whole roof. But you could probably just repair maybe the first 2 or 3 rows right in this section. If you don't fix it, water will get back behind here and it'll start rotting the wood behind it. So that's why you have shingles on to protect the wood. Here, this piece of fascia here on the garage was bare wood. That will not last. So that needs to either be painted, stained, or wrapped in aluminum. You can see through here with each item here going down. This is all of the things that we check. Some houses have some of this stuff, some do not. So that on this particular one, hip and ridge flashing, valid flashing, roof to wall flashing, chimney flashing, a lot of that stuff did not apply, or it was in good shape. That's why we don't have pictures of it. Here, this is usually a plumbing pipe sticking out here, and it should look like this one. And for whatever reason, it was covered shut, which that's not the proper way to cap off the chimney. That should have been removed because lead, as you can see here, this is a lead flashing for the plumbing pipe. Over time, it will break, crack, whatever. So that's not, to me, that's a temporary fix. As you can see here, this is your plumbing flashing. So this is where your bathroom pipes go out the roof. and it eliminates the sewer gas. And you flash that so that water can't get inside the building. But you can see right here, it's cracked. So that would allow water, and that crack will get bigger. So we're recommending that she changes this flashing. Some of this stuff is weird. Like this, I don't know. It looks like a big old grate, like they use grate stuff to seal. Maybe they cut a hole in this roof and they use grate stuff to seal it. I would definitely have the roofer flash that properly. Grate stuff is just a foam insulation, and over time it'll just deteriorate. There's another plumbing flashing that's just damaged, so we want that to be repaired also. Now, just so you know, this kind of stuff that I'm showing looks like a lot of stuff, but it's a lot of piddly stuff. And sometimes when people are getting a home inspection, we're educating them that this stuff, everything I just showed, was probably no more than $500 to repair. So some people get freaked out that, oh, it needs all this stuff, but that kind of stuff shouldn't be scaring you. Right. I'm learning right along here with you guys because I haven't seen this inspection in about 3 months, right? Hugo? It's been about 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely, about that long.
So I have to read a little bit here as I go. Here we just did give a description of basically the materials that were on the house. So like the gutters were aluminum, downspouts aluminum, soffit was wood, fascias wood, windows were casement. Now this house was unique to what it was. This house was built a long time ago, and it reminded me of a Frank Lloyd Wright house. This house was way ahead of its time. And back in, when was this built? Do you remember? 60s maybe?
Exactly, in the mid-60s.
Yeah, so this house and where it was located, very high-end house at the time. You would have had to be rich to own this house or to build this type of house back in the day. So it's kind of cool to inspect this house. So we get up on the roof, we see that it's all the gutters are clogged. Any house that you buy should always have those checked. Even on your personal home, you should always have the gutters cleaned. Usually in the fall, after all leaves fall, and then in the spring, if there's any debris or anything, because you don't want the gutters to be clogged, and then all that water gets up underneath the shingles. In this case, we don't have shingles, but typically the houses have shingles, and that's why you would want to do that. So, okay, here, this picture. I believe this was the garage, but there was multiple areas where there was no gutters on the house. Typically, the reason you have gutters is the water runs downhill into the gutter, goes down a downspout, and then you see this soffit here. It keeps all of the water away from the house. The water close to a house, it can do a lot of damage to the foundation. So that's why I'm pretty particular about gutters and downspouts. Okay, so this is a slab house. There's no basement, there's no crawl space. So with this water, see these downspouts here are dumping right next to the house. Over a long period of time, I just did an inspection today, and there's a retaining wall holding the dirt up from the side of the driveway, and the whole retaining wall was cracked. Well, that didn't happen overnight. That happened because the water just kept dumping right next to that foundation for the last 20, 30 years, and over time, it will ruin a foundation. That's why on these little elbows here, I would always recommend that this gets extended at least 3 to 4 feet. I like, you could do it with piece of downspout, or I like the Menards, you know, the little flexible ones that it's kind of like an accordion. And that way, when you're cutting the grass, whatever, you can move them out of the way. Right? So that's why I like it. No, anything's better than this. Somebody just asked a question and it went away. I think it was, can you tell if it's a slab house from the outside? Typically, yes. Usually on crawl space houses, they'll have vents in the outside where you can, but not always. The other thing is if it's a basement, you can, usually there's window wells, but I guess my answer would be not always. Slab houses are great for rentals. One thing I will say when you're looking at a slab house is you should pull the vent covers off inside the house and look down in the ductwork. A lot of times the ductwork is disintegrated. We always try to make sure that airflow, because what happens when the duct collapses, your heat doesn't come out, your air conditioning doesn't come out. So I always recommend that we look into the vent covers, pull those off, and make sure you don't see stone down there or sand or dirt or whatever inside there, because sometimes they do rot out. Okay. Section to the soffit was damaged. That's pretty obvious right here. So the reason this gets damaged like this is you see this is raw wood. Raw wood, you could never have raw wood on a house. Raw wood, if you put it outside, eventually it will rot as it did here. It's starting to pull down and the part of the fascia is also rotting right here. Same thing here. I think if it was me, I'm flipping the house. Depending on my budget, I'm probably going to scrape and paint this. I'd try to repair this. But if it's in the budget, I might wrap this in aluminum, which can be pretty pricey, especially this house was pretty big. So I think this was 3,000 or 4,000 square feet, wasn't it, Hugo?
Yeah, 2,500.
Yeah, but it was a ranch. So that was without, there was an apartment above the garage too, I believe. So.
Correct.
So a 2,500 square foot ranch is actually really a large house. So see all this raw wood here? That all would have to be repaired. I'm always looking at this also. So if you're flipping this house, I want to make sure that there's going to be, when she flips it, I'm not going to be the one inspecting it. It'll be another home inspector that the new buyer has hired. So I try to tell you ahead of time, this is things that the other inspector is going to try to look for. So, and not all inspectors are created equal. Some people just have 1,000 things wrong that is more nonsense and scares the buyers away. Always when you have a bump out like this, we always try to get our camera to look underneath there, because if this is usually raw wood under there, which they should have some type of soffit material under here that should protect the wood. The underside of all of this was all rotted out. So can't really tell by that picture. Here we got it right here. So I took my camera underneath that bump out, and this is what I see. So animals can get in there. The wood will eventually rot. You can see a lot of the insulation is already fallen out. I believe this was the high efficiency furnace. This is not the proper way to vent it. You see all this raw wood underneath the soffit. This should have extended out or came out of the building in a different spot. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. More soffit. This is, I think, more of, I think this was the same picture. Remember the fascia is starting to rot here. This was on the same picture before. All right. This house was actually vacant for a long time. So you see this area right here. See how it looks like it's chewed. So an animal probably chewed its way through here. So this fascia needs to be repaired. It's another reason I don't like, yes, Valerie, they were.
Oh, there was a question, George. If you can talk about the aluminum versus vinyl.
Typically, when you wrap, you don't use vinyl, you use aluminum. You could have vinyl siding or aluminum siding, but typically I've never seen a soffit or fascia in vinyl. Just aluminum. Aluminum is just metal that they can bend. Hopefully I answered your question. I'm not a big fan of wood fascia and soffits because I've seen so much damage. And if you don't keep up with staining or painting it on a regular basis, this happens or this happens. And typically animals can't chew through wood, aluminum, but they can definitely chew through wood. With that being said, we see a lot of animals. Anytime you have branches or anything close, remotely close to a roof, the squirrels can get up on the roof and they create a lot of damage. So if it's wrapped, then wood is okay. Typically what they do is they just put the aluminum right over the wood. So even if you have a little bit of rotted wood, it's still okay to go over it without repairing it first, as long as they have something to nail to that's solid. If it's all rotted, like here, they would have to repair that wood. They couldn't just put aluminum over there. There's nothing to nail it to. Here, it's if this is just paint right here, you just scrape the paint away and you can put the aluminum right over the top of that and nail to it. Does that make sense? You're welcome.
Yes, it does make sense.
Okay. Usually when houses are vacant for a long time, you get, the house isn't staying at a steady temperature. It's getting extremely hot or it's getting extremely cold. And what it does is it creates moisture inside the windows and it drools down the windows, and then it usually causes the window wood to rot. And you can see here, this is all rotted here. I'm not sure if that's what caused this to rot. You know, we're just speculating because the house has been vacant for a long time. But typically that's what happens. Like if you've ever walked into a junky house that's been vacant for a long time, you'll see, you'll see that paint peeling off the walls. It's like drooping off of the ceiling. That's why, because it's got so hot and it's got so cold, and there's no airflow, people walking in and out of the house on a regular basis. So that's basically why a house that sits, I used to build new construction homes, and while they were sitting on the market for a month or two, even if you were flipping a house, same thing. You get a lot of bugs, you get little slight cracking going on because it's not being used properly. You don't have people walking in and out on a regular basis. So that's usually why. I don't, nothing you can do. These are the houses that we want, the ones that are vacant, right? The ones that are dumpy. But it's my job just to kind of tell you what's wrong with them. So a lot of the windows can be usually fixed, but in this case, a lot of them were beyond, they were pretty rotted and or they did not open when we tried to open them. Now, when I say here, sections of the wall surface in need of paint or stain, I would always recommend to stain this type of siding. Because stain, you can only put so much stain on before it starts repelling, if that makes sense. It'll suck in and suck in and suck in until it can't take it anymore. Paint, you could put 100 coats of paint on this, and it's just going to be a buildup where the stain actually sucks into the wood. And in my opinion, stain is way better on the exterior than paint. So that's what all this is. We just are saying that it's in need of scrape and paint. Okay, so here you see this minor crack. This one is very superficial. My concrete guy has told me there's two kinds of concrete. There's concrete that's cracked, and there's concrete that's not cracked yet. And this, over 50 years, 60 years, whatever it has been, has a small stress crack. Nothing to be alarmed about. When it starts becoming an issue like this one here, it's a little more in the case of rotted windows, would it be enough to replace? There's a question here. In the case of rotted windows, would it be enough to replace the sash, or would the entire window generally need to be replaced, including glass? If it's rotted on the inside, you got to figure these windows are really old because it's a really old house. I think it's probably more economical to probably change the window. Do you know what you guys did on that, Hugo, with those?
Oh yeah, we new windows for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense unless, I don't know. I don't think it makes sense. The windows nowadays, or window guy I use, he averages about, I use double hung. In this house, there was a lot of casement, which in those cases, they're a little bit more money. But a lot of times you can switch them from casement to double hung. And an average window, I spent about $250. That's taking the old window out, putting the new window in, insulating, caulking, and capping it. So to me, to try to spend $150 or $200 to try to repair a window, when you could have it, which the old windows aren't as energy efficient, or not, our values aren't there. To me, I think it's in your best interest probably to change them.
Absolutely.
See this crack here. Plus for resale, if you guys know, if a buyer is going to buy, because this is a flip, right, Hugo?
Correct.
So somebody has old wood windows, people would probably, it's a good selling point that we have all branded windows. So, but on the older historic buildings, sometimes it's kind of cool to leave the old leaded glass type window. It just kind of depends on the house. Hopefully that answered your question. But here, this crack compared to this crack is pretty different, right? This one is a little more substantial. It's when they crack and there's a big gap like that, there's a chance water can get water intrusion in there. Water gets in there and it freezes, and then it creates a lot more damage. So I would probably definitely get these fixed. But I don't, when I see this on the outside, I keep this in mind. So when I'm walking inside, if I can feel the foundation or the floor is heaved or it's uneven, then it could be a bigger problem. But as long as the walls aren't heaving one side to the other, so say this side and this side are both even with each other and it's just a crack right down the middle, I think you're okay. Where when this side of the wall is sticking out maybe a half inch to an inch further than this side of the wall, now we got some structural stuff going As long as it's even, a small crack like that, I would just repair that. For a lot of people say, oh, well, what about the little crack in there? Almost every garage floor I check has a small crack, nothing to worry about. Now, with that being said, I did an inspection in Streamwood, and the village was requiring them to rip out the driveway and replace because of a small crack. I would have fought that with the village till the cows came home. So, but with that being said, village always supersedes what the home inspector says. So, this door, as you can see, was damaged. I couldn't lift it any higher than that. So we recommend that you have an overhead door guy. This was probably a simple repair. You didn't replace this door probably. A lot of these could just be repaired, new rollers, or maybe it needs to have a broken spring or something like that for a few $100. Now, if this door on the outside was damaged, then I would probably you'd have to do a new door. All right, so this is a door that goes between the garage and the house. This cannot have glass in it. Reason being is they want this to be a fire rated door, which glass is definitely not fire rated. Also, it should have a auto close hinge on it. Reason being, if the car was running, this door is not automatically closed. You left it open, carbon monoxide comes in the house. Most people hate these doors with spring loaded because you're carrying groceries in, they keep slamming, or it keeps slamming in your face. So, but it is definitely for safety. And that's what I'm pointing at. This should be a auto. If you ever see the proper hinge, it's like a self-closing hinge, and it's not there. Now, if this was a safety door, if it was already a solid wood door or a steel door, then you could just change this hinge or two hinges just so it auto closes. Go to the structure, like here, all of this stuff. We couldn't see the post, we couldn't see the beams. Typically, you can't see that unless it's a basement or a crawl space, because typically all of that is inside the walls. But these would be all the things we would check if it had a crawl space or a basement. And on this one, there was no attic. I don't believe there was an attic. You see where it says roof sheathing, roof framing. Typically, we would crawl up in the attic and we'd be able to see it. But this particular style house, there is no attic. If you noticed on the roof, it was more of a flat roof. Oh, and that's one thing I probably should have said. On a flat roof doesn't mean it's perfectly flat. There's always like a 2 or 3 degree angle so that the water can run off. Otherwise, it would just end up pooling on the roof, and that's a lot of weight. Electric. All right. Anytime you see a house like this, where they have these little fuses in there, the village, if you are going to pull permits, the village will never allow that. Nor should you want that. Most insurance companies will not insure a property that has fuses. And this was just kind of a sub panel. The panels themselves were actually newer, but this should go away. And here's why. See this fuse here? Could be a 10 amp. This one could be a 30 amp. But if this one blew, you could take that 30 amp and put it where the 10 amp is, and it would never trip. So that's why you should never want fuses, and you should always have breakers. All right. Home inspections aren't to tell you what the code is. I'm here to tell you what most villages, I'm just assuming here that all of you are investors. For a homeowner, I wouldn't even probably say anything about this because it would be confusing to them. I'm saying if you're going to go into a house and repair it, and the village will want you as a investor to bring it up to code, right? So I'm giving you my life experience and what I've got called out for. So this stuff here is BX. BX is just a corrugated metal tube with wires that run through it. See all these wires in this box right here? They do not want to see that. You're allowed to use this for a whip. Like if you were going to do under cabinet lights, 3 feet away, you could daisy chain can lights from one to the next. Some villages will allow, some will not. So I'm pointing it out that I know that Frida's an investor and that she's going to have to upgrade this to conduit. So if you don't know what conduit is, it's a solid piece of steel that they are metal that they can bend. And the wires run inside that. Now, nationwide, they don't allow BX. Now, some of you might be familiar with Romex, which is like, to me, it's like an extension cord. It's wires inside a piece of rubber. But they use that nationwide. And I think that they're stuck on conduit in Illinois because of the unions. Question here. So what would be approximate cost of that upgrade on this house? What would you budget for that year? Are you talking about the electrical itself for the whole house, or is that your question for the whole house?
Yeah, so for for the entire house, the budget was 65, but it's gone over. So it's right now we're probably 75.
Yeah, and that's common. I'm
Yeah.
doing a house right now in Matson that we actually had to change the panel and upgrade. There was a lot of BX in that house. So we tried to save what we could, and I think I'm going to be all in with the trim about 7,000. Then I have a fire damage house that the whole house will have to be redone. We'll probably be at 8 or 9 for that. But we have to change the meter or the service, the panel, and rewire the whole house. Because the fire, we had to demo all the drywall, and behind every wall was BX. I never thought it was even allowed. So back in the day, all they used to have was these 2-prong outlets. So all your lamps, all of anything, you know, if you ever went to grandma's house, they had, everything was lamps, right? And everything was 2-prong outlets. So when we see that, you cannot, more of your modern appliances are all 3-prong, and there's no way to plug into this. So the villages will never allow a 2-prong outlet. They would all have to be upgraded to 3-prong because you can't ground these outlets. So, so that's why we put it in here. All right. So this kitchen was totally redone. Very nice kitchen, but they had some really modern techie stuff. But a lot of the outlets I couldn't, or the switches, I couldn't figure out what they were for. I checked everything, I couldn't. So that doesn't mean there's anything wrong. I built a house where I have switches where I think the electrician put a 3-gang box there, where thered be 1, 2, 3 sets of switches, and ended up only using 2. So instead of, there's no way to really blank one of these off. So we just put a switch there. Doesn't mean that there's a problem. Same here. There was some switches, I couldn't figure out what they were. But when we're buying these houses, we have to do our best to guess what some of the stuff is. But that doesn't mean that there's a defect. It just means that we couldn't figure out what's wrong. And we see this a lot on vacant houses, multiple lights that do not work, right? It's just probably just a burned out bulb, but it's our job to kind of tell you that. Ceiling fan, there was no ceiling fans, no smoke detectors. So typically the rule is on a single story home, I would want them in a smoke detector in every bedroom. And I would do a combo if it was my personal house. So meaning a smoke / carbon. If you want to just do it by code. Now, I think that maybe that's just for rentals, but for flips, if you were just to do the bare minimum, you have to have a smoke and a carbon within 15 feet of a bedroom. I think they're there to save lives, so I do combos in the bedrooms, smoke / carbon. And on this particular house, since it's a ranch, I would put them in the bedroom, and then I would put one somewhere around the furnace area. Reason being, and then I would buy the interconnected ones, because if one goes off, they all go off. Now, if it's a flip, I'm going to do it as cheap as I can, right? But for a rental, I want my tenant to be safe, especially now after my house burned down. That was a tenant-occupied house. So the gas was off on this particular house when we checked it. So that's why I couldn't inspect. I could take the cover off. The inside was really clean. But if you remember, so this is a high efficiency furnace. So you see this pipe coming out here. That was those plastic pipes that we've seen outside. I don't think that was the proper way to vent those. Because if you think about it, all that moisture, high efficiency furnace gives off a lot of moisture. And if you remember, they were right underneath the soffit, and there's like all that moisture is just going right up into the soffit, which eventually is going to either rot the soffit. You can see all the paint was missing off of that soffit. So it should go up into the air. Shouldn't be anything obstructing it from dissipating. And nice simple little word here, right? Doesn't look like that filter was changed in years. Plug solid. For just your personal home, this type of filter is a more expensive. This one probably every 6 months. But in your typical home, I don't like the 99-cent filters, the cheapos. I like the ones that are about $3-4. They're good for about 3 months, unless you have a lot of allergies. Then you can buy the $10 or $15 ones. But good rule of thumb is every time you make a mortgage payment, pull that out, look at it. If it looks dirty like this, you definitely want to change it. The arrow on these filters, I see it all the time in these houses that I inspect. The arrow should face towards the furnace. They are directional. So it kind of defeats the purpose if you put it in backwards. So a lot of this stuff, some of this software is basically, so if you see this expansion tank, all of this stuff here, this is basically if it was a boiler system. So this was a forced air, so none of this stuff none of it applies. think we were, yeah, it was too cold. So air conditioners should never be checked unless the temperature is 65 degrees or higher. It can ruin the compressor. So all we can do is a visual. We kind of look to see what the date is. We look to see the outside fins, make sure that that's clean. That's about as much as we can check in the wintertime. The inside coil is actually inside the furnace, and usually we can't check that either. But in the summertime, we operate the furnace and the air conditioning. But if it's all the units all beat up outside, then naturally you probably should put it in your budget that you should change it. And whenever I do a home inspection with you guys, I always try to help you with the scope of work. I always try to tell you what I would do. You don't have to do what I tell you to do. I've been doing this a long time. I came from the flipping side where all I did was flip. So some of this stuff is hard for me to pull back and just say this is good enough. So, but I'm learning. Okay, so the water heater, somebody needed it more than they did. So somebody probably, my guess, is stole the water heater. Water heater for this house with a bigger house, I'd probably go with a 50-gallon water heater. Cost of that installed, water heater itself, you could probably buy for about $600 for the 50, maybe 650. But the problem is you're going to have to get all the gas pipe hooked up to it, all the plumbing to it, because it looks like it was cut off right here. So I would budget about $1,500 for that. All right, so when you see this, this is what they call a pressure tank, okay? That usually means that you're on well, not usually, this means you are on a well, right? Question, what warranty do you recommend for water heater? If I'm flipping it, cheap, right? You don't need a warranty. If you're going to keep it for a long-term rental, a lot of times your plumber or your heating guy can install those and they'll give you a 5-year parts and labor. I don't think anything more than 5 years, because then they prorate it, and to me, nobody's going to keep track. Unless you're better than me, maybe you can keep track of it, but I would just do a 5-year, I think is more than enough. And I don't need a warranty if it's a flip, because any work anybody does for me, I make them give me a 1-year warranty. And typically, if you're flipping it a year from now, and most flippers they don't give any kind of warranty. So I typically, anything that I fixed, so if I did a water heater, if I did a furnace, if I did new plumbing or electric panel, if any of that stuff fails within the first year, I will warranty it, because then I just call the guys and they go in and fix it. So anyhow, this is what you call a pressure tank. And that's what happens is this fills up with water and it's pressurized. So once this runs down, then your well kicks on and it fills back up, and that's how you get pressure in the house at all times. That makes sense? Well is not that expensive to replace, but septic systems are. So I don't like when a lot of the students are buying these houses that are on well and septic for rental properties. For flips, they're fine as long as everything's working. But a septic system can be anywhere from $15,000 to $25,000 to replace. And tenants don't really care if it's going to cost you that much. They'll still put diapers and wipes and everything else down. And then septic systems need a special toilet paper so that it breaks down. Okay, you can see the age of these windows, right? These are casement windows and they open out this way. Most of your windows nowadays open left to right or right to left. They don't usually go down to up. And you can see the hardware here is missing, right? And a lot of them, I could not get them open. Sometimes when you can't get them open, they're just painted shut. But in this case, you know, you see the problems here. This one, the crank, you can see the mechanism is broken. The trim, I think, was missing on this one. Typically what happens is you force these so much and it pops the trim up because the lever's frozen. All right. Anytime you see this as a deadbolt, the city will make you change it. Reason being is if this has a key in it and it's locked, or the key's in it in case of emergency and you're trying to get out and the key breaks off or you can't find the key, they just want the twist knob ones now. So that's usually you're going to change the locks and the deadbolts when you buy the house. So, but it's just me telling you that they don't allow this. I tried with all my might to open this door and I couldn't get it open. So that's my sign language. You like my sign language? That means S in sign language. Means stuck. Okay. Here you see how this is the inside of the fireplace. We're looking for all the mortar to be good. And you can see here and here it's starting to crack because fire can get behind this block and cause a fire. So that's why we say have a chimney sweep and they can repair this. And it looks like this is the damper. Always, this was an expensive lesson for me. If a village is requiring you to certify a chimney, be scared. Because in, forget what year it was, 2008 or 2012, I can't remember. They will not allow these mechanical dampers anymore. And the reason why is it's energy code. So what they do is they have to remove this whole metal piece. They install what looks like almost like a rubber plunger with a spring-loaded chain. And that's the new damper. The reason being is these let hot air out, let cold air in, and the plunger style secures it from any air coming in or out. And that's why. So I'm thinking $250 to certify my chimney, and $2,500 later, they had to change this in order to certify it. So if you have a fireplace in the future, you might want to check with the building department before you buy it, ask them what the requirements are on a fireplace. I know now. All right. Remember, like I was telling you, there was no access to usually above the drywall. There's insulation. We can never check the walls for insulation. In the crawl space, we'll check. In the basement, we'll check. But we're not, it's not an invasive inspection. So we just have to assume that the walls are good enough, because in a flip, I'm not going to pull all the drywall apart just to see if it's got insulation. And typically on inspector or investor inspections, I don't check the appliances just because most of the time people are going to replace the appliances. But on this one, those appliances were in pretty good shape, but there was no gas turned on at the time of inspection, so I could not test the certain appliances. So that's it. Then after everything that we just talked about, my report comes with a summary, so you don't have to go back to how many pages is this? 41 pages. The last few pages is basically all the defects that we talked about through this whole inspection. So, any more questions? Oh, we have another one. Would you check behind walls? No, I would not. You could have an insulation company blow it in if you would like, but I wouldn't. Usually when the house was built, there was some type of insulation in the walls. Over the years, it's probably dry rotted and not as energy efficient as a new house. Old houses, they used to require 2x4 exterior walls. New houses, the new code is 2x6 walls. And the reason being is energy codes. And I just built my personal home about 2.5 years ago, and they're insane with the energy codes now. I had to caulk all of the outer walls where the exterior walls from where it met the floor to the exterior wall, all had to be caulked. All of the ductwork had to be tested. When the house was finished, they made me do a door test. They make the house so tight that I had to add a fresh air pump, which was at $4,000. So it's like the energy codes are getting a little out of hand, in my opinion. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm looking through here, Hugo, to see any more questions here. Do you recommend tankless? I don't. Tankless are very, I'm assuming you're talking about water heater. Tankless are very expensive. I don't know enough about them at this point. I think a tankless water heater, have you ever done one, Hugo? I think they're about $1,500. So I wouldn't recommend that. What is my pricing? My pricing to do a walk and talk would be, I walk through, you take notes, you take pictures. For an average size house, it's 1,500 square feet or lower. That runs $250 within my area. If I have to drive an hour and a half, I don't typically like to go that far, but I will. And then if you would like a report like what we just seen here, it's $375 up to 1,500 square feet. We do bigger homes. I mean, it's not, and for every 500 square feet, I go up $25. That makes sense. How do you prioritize what absolutely needs to be done first? Are you talking about rental flips? I cannot generalize this answer. Flips. All right, I always have a want list and a have to do list, right? And the more I have to do, the less I do of the stuff I want. Does that make sense? So try to make that a little simpler for you. So we opened some walls up, and there's $2,000 of plumbing I didn't expect. Maybe I don't take out a bearing wall. You have to do the safety things. You have to make sure the plumbing is good. You have to make sure the electrical's good, and you got to make sure the heating's good. The rest is just fluff, right? Windows, if they're broken, you have to fix them. If the village fails you on your inspection, you have to fix it. If the sewer backs up or there's a break in the sewer, you have to fix that. Then maybe things I used to spend a lot of money on that is really not necessary is expensive cabinets, expensive granite, light fixtures. Nobody cares if there's a $250 ceiling fan or light fixture. You might pick something that you love, and the person that buys it is going to say, that's the ugliest thing I ever seen. So don't put a lot of money into that kind of stuff. Flooring, I used to always buy all my tile, whatever was cheap and on sale, and splash a little mosaic in it, and it'll look beautiful. Flooring now, the popular stuff now is vinyl plank, and that's in higher end houses too. It's not just cheap houses. Plus the vinyl plank, don't buy the cheapest stuff on a rental. For flips, you're not going to live there. The reason you don't want the cheapest stuff in a rental, you need something that's going to survive tenants. Homeowners, they're not going to be as apt as rough on the flooring as a tenant will. So you can get away with whatever's cheapest. Paint, I would recommend Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore. I'm not a fan of Home Depot paint. But this is all just my personal opinion. But you need to make sure that the house is safe and anything that's broken is fixed, because a guy like me comes in with the new buyer and we're going to beat you up. Not me personally, I'm just telling you that because I do flips, and the home inspectors, they beat me up, on nonsense. But, at that point, it's still a negotiation. You don't have to fix 500 things on the list. But if you do the ones that make sense, do a few of them, that usually goes a long way. So hopefully that answers your question. Do you recommend carpet? For flips, yes. Rentals, no. I carpet the bedrooms usually, or the upstairs. People they tend to like hardwood or vinyl or some type of hard laminate in the living areas. Kitchen, definitely no carpet in the kitchen, but basements, if it doesn't flood, carpet's the cheapest. So for flips, yes. Rentals, no, because I used to put carpet in my rentals. I don't think they ever vacuum it. And I have carpet in my last house for 10 years. It still looked brand new. But I don't know, they just beat the crap out of carpet. So unless you can get it really, really cheap and you have somebody that can install it cheap, I would stay away from carpet. I know Home Depot is not highest quality, and for a rental, you'd have to repaint between tenants most likely anyway. Why would you use a more expensive paint? It's not more expensive. I use semi-gloss on the walls, and you could use like a Pro 200 from Sherwin-Williams, and it's like $25 a gallon. It's not very expensive. So, and now some people claim that Behr is really good now. I don't like it. It's my personal opinion. If you go to any professional painter that has a company, they're using Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore, and there's a reason for that. So I don't repaint between tenants. I try not to. I do on my rentals, I do quarterly maintenance checks. I go in, I change the filter, I check under the sinks for leaks, and I make sure the smoke detectors work. And it's more of a snoop, if that makes sense. I want to see how they're taking care of it. And if I have to repaint it in between tenants, I'm going to back charge them, unless they've been with me a long time. But we just had a tenant move out after a year, and I back charged her. They lived like pigs, and I told her she lived like a pig. So maybe that's not politically correct, but I just don't know how it could look so bad in 1 year. So a lot of almost every wall I was able to wash clean, but a few of them I just couldn't. And she thought it was a good idea to hang every family photo that she's had for the last 50 years on the wall with 400, 500 nails in the wall. So anyhow, that's my take on that. So anything else? All right, Hugo, I think that's it. Hello? I think we lost Hugo. Anybody else have any questions?
Here, can you hear me?
I hear you now.
Oh, perfect. Everyone, thank you very much